everyone. Welcome to Rutgers Cooperative Extension's Great Tomato Tasting Day at Home. I'm Sandra Grenci, Family and Community Health Sciences Educator for Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Hunterdon County. And I have to say that the Great Tomato Tasting event is one of my very favorite outreach events every year. And I'm so glad that we'll be doing this together online this year. Where else can you see people lined up by the hundreds to taste fresh vegetables and fruit? So today, I selected a recipe that will, of course, feature famous tomatoes, and we'll be making a roasted tomato and white bean dip. And I chose this recipe because it's very versatile, it's very easy, everything goes into the food processor in one big batch. And it's also a really great way to use up roasted tomatoes, which you also may have frozen, like I do at the end of every season. So before we start with the actual recipe, I wanted to talk a little bit about roasting tomatoes. Roasting tomatoes is, as I said, a great way to bring out the natural rich, sweet flavor of tomatoes. When we roast them, we remove a lot of the water, so what's left is an incredibly rich and delicious pulp. So how do we do this? Well, first let's talk about varieties of tomatoes that are really appropriate for roasting. So small plums are ideal. Plums in general, or paste tomatoes, have a very high pulp to water ratio compared to large slicing tomatoes. So they work really well for roasting. So from my garden, I brought some San Marzano plum types. They're usually small, so these I'll just wash, core, and cut in half. They're a really good size for roasting. Or Aroma type, kind of a small plum. I also grew this year Rio Grande plums. They're usually on the small side. And another favorite tomato that I like to roast are these heirloom garden salad types or mini plums. This particular variety is Blush. It's called Blush, and it has a delicious, dense pulp, lots of flavor. So you want relatively small tomatoes that won't take hours and hours to roast. And all we need to do is, as I said, we're going to wash them, take out, just core them, cut them across, take out the core, cut them in half, and then lay them cut side up on a roasting sheet. And here's a tip. I use a piece of parchment paper on my roasting pan to make really easy cleanup. So, how long? We put them in the oven. The recipe, by the way, is posted on the Tomato Day website, so you can go there and get it after you're done watching me. Usually I set my oven for between 375 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. What really matters, you'll have to check them and make sure, depending on the size of yours, and how long they'll take, but you want most of the water to be removed. You want a little bit of browning on top, and you can also season them. Sometimes I will make a batch that's seasoned, and then how will I use them? Every which way. They're going into our bean dip. I've used them in stews, in stir fries. They make great pizza toppings. They're just so rich flavored. And the best thing, if you are like me and have a bounty of homegrown vegetables at the end of the summer, when you freeze them, because most of the water is removed, they take up very little space. I can get easily a dozen plums reduced down that will fit in this little tiny freezer bag. So, great space savers. All right, so let's get started with the actual recipe. Really easy. What we're going to need today We'll need a can of well-drained and rinsed cannellini white beans. I like cannellini beans because they have a soft texture and they blend up really well. And they also are pale in color, and we'll be able to see the beautiful roasted tomatoes. So I've already washed and drained my cannellini beans. I'm going to dump them right into my food processor. And here is about a half a cup of my roasted tomatoes that I actually froze and defrosted for today. You can really use as much or as little as you like, depending on how much flavor you want in your tomato flavor you want in your beans. So I'm going to start with about a half a cup. I'm going to blend this up before I add the spices, just to get it a little bit processed, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients. Here goes. To blend the beans and the tomatoes a little bit. Okay, we're going to make it to our consistency that we like it a little bit. I'm going to add now, just to give it a little bit of liquid, between 1 and 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. So I'm going to start with about 1. You can always add a little bit more later. And the same thing with olive oil. I'm using olive oil. You can really use whatever favorite oil you like. Putting in about a tablespoon to start. I'll adjust it a little bit later. And roasted garlic cloves. Now I've made this recipe with fresh garlic, but I feel like it overpowers the flavor of the tomatoes and beans. So I roasted ahead, and I will start with 1 beautifully soft and caramelized head of roasted garlic. Okay, back to the blending. So again, you can adjust the consistency of your dip however you like it. I think mine needs a little bit more liquid, so I'll finish it up with the rest of that extra tablespoon of lemon juice. Maybe just a little bit more olive oil. It's totally up to you. And this time, now I'm going to add the basic seasoning. So for this batch, I'm really just going to add a pinch of salt, just to bring out the flavors of the tomatoes and beans. If you've seasoned your tomatoes in advance, you may not even need to do that. And just to spice it up a little bit, just a dash of cayenne pepper. You can live as dangerously as you like with that. Okay, so the final blending. It's really nice. So I will just take a scoop out to show you. So it does have the texture of a nice stiff hummus. It'll stay really nicely on sliced vegetables if you want to dip that. So just to show you, it has a beautiful tomato color, just like a blush of tomato color. So that's really all there is to the basic recipe, but I do want to show you a couple of seasoning variations. So if you wanted to try the dip with something different, it works really well with different kinds of spices. You could use fresh or dried basil to give it sort of a Mediterranean type flavor. You could try oregano. Now, if you want to give it sort of the Middle East type flavor, ground cumin, or smoked paprika, or really any combination that you like. So, roasted tomato and white bean dip can be really versatile. Enjoy it with fresh cut up vegetables, whole grain crackers. It will even freeze well. And by the way, this recipe makes about 1.25 cups, but I guarantee once you make it, you'll want to make double the batch. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give it a try. Remember to roast up some tomatoes at the end of the season. You'll be really glad you did in the middle of the winter. So today, tune into my colleague Daryl Minch's recipe. She'll be making some awesome Jersey tomato and peach salsa at 3 o'clock. And Daryl and I will also be doing a webinar on all the ways that you can preserve your bounty of tomatoes. So thanks for joining me, and enjoy the rest of the events today.